It's 7:30, so time to start the meeting. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the executive. Just to alert you to the fact that the proceedings are being filmed, but the camera is always pointed this way. So if you are asking me questions or supplementary, it'll be your voice that will be heard, not your face, so we'll be able to recognise you on that basis. So, having said that, move on to item number 1. Apologies.
Chairman, no apologies.
Good. I'm glad about that because everybody's here. Minutes of previous meeting, pages 7 to 14. Any questions? Can I sign them as a true record? Okay. Did you? Have I swept them up somewhere? I haven't got them. Well, I will sign them, I'll get them.
I'll find them.
While we're waiting for that, we'll move on. Any declarations of interest?
I need to declare an interest by virtue of the fact I'm a non-executive director. I'm paid non-executive director after this. I believe that I am still allowed to discuss and to vote on the matter.
I'd like to declare an interest that my husband is the director of the holding company and there's a chapel. I have to continue to declare that interest. Well, I can vote under it.
Thank you. If there's no other declarations of interest, we'll move on to public question time. Is Claire McDonald here? Would you like to step up and put your question?
Good evening, thank you. Question 1. We understand that space can be made available at Loddon School using either the parent hut, which has provision for young children, or the former children's centre, which is currently partly used as offices. Considering there are circa 30 early families that have been offered a divert school, then we would like to understand from the executive what factors are preventing the council from utilising this space for a 2015-16 reception class.
Thank you for a very interesting question. I'll hand over to Charlotte to provide a response.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald.
Technology. Get it right one day.
All good. Thank you very much for your question, and I'm sorry I've got a very long answer, but hopefully it'll give you some depth to reply. The Loddon buildings, as you know, are fully deployed at the moment. The former Children's Centre has been leased to Loddon Primary School to provide additional early years capacity, so that's for the 2-year-old children at the moment. This is to meet the statutory need to provide additional places for younger children. The offices are used by Woking Borough Council, and they adopt at the moment, at the moment, Adopt Berkshire service. Adopt Berkshire provide adoption services for 4 unitary authorities. Due to the sensitivity of the services provided, the activities could not be relocated in time to be confident that space could be released to be remodelled as a classroom. The parent hut is well used to provide a necessary training space that would be difficult to replicate elsewhere at short notice. It is possible that using any of these spaces as teaching spaces would constitute a change of use for planning purposes, and if so, would require planning consent. Internal space is only part of the need though, and the council would need to determine if the playing areas would provide sufficient spaces to accommodate 30 extra children. And that needs to be done with safety in mind as well, and without compromising their education. The fundamental problem with creating a bulge class is also around is not only through the provision of space, internal and external. They're around the recruitment of staff, funding, the wider impact on education, the impact on future admissions and on the local community, and in particular managing the school run. The bulge class requires the school to be able to employ a series of specialist teachers for relatively short periods. This inevitably means employing teachers on short-term contracts. This works against the need to provide a stable, highly skilled team of teachers to run a school to provide the quality of education that our children need. Funding comes from a central pot. This is called a Designated Schools Grant, or DSG, as many people know. It normally is lagged, and that's to say that the funding is largely based on headcount from the previous academic year. Bulge classes need additional non-formulaic funding to fund teacher and resources, because these are new classes on top of the previous year's headcount. This reduces the funding available to the schools generally. This is particularly problematic at a time when the council knows that it has a large number of new schools to open, all of which will require top-up funding on top of the formulaic funding to support them in their early years. Not only would the new class require additional unplanned for spend in the 2015-16 year, but the removal of the children from other local schools to the bulge class would leave these schools suffering a reduced budget in their 2016 and 17 year. These schools are currently making staffing and activity plans based on their expected roles, and unplanned for role reductions have a direct impact on the services they can provide for their school role. Children admitted to a bulge class after normal admission rounds often come from surrounding community outside the school's designated area. The consequence of this is that the additional siblings in later years who may not have a prior claim on school places over first and only children, even when those live in the designated area, and families with siblings claim do not. The wider community impact must be considered. A bulge class will generate additional school-run car trips. Where schemes have a longer preparation period, it's also often possible to look at measures to mitigate that impact. This could be through additional parking patrols like yellow lines, for example, or new parent drop-off zones, or measures to encourage walking to school through like walking buses. If planning consent for change of use is required, then these measures would need to be in place before the classes are opened. This might not be possible at this stage. The final issue and consideration is the ability for the school to be able to respond to this request. The school is keen to help the community, but have informed us that regrettably they will not be able to assist due to the teaching capacity at the school available for 2015-16.
That's a very, very long-winded. Would you like us to send you a copy of that?
It would be very much appreciated.
Okay, I'm sure we can arrange that. Do you have a supplementary?
I do indeed.
Please go ahead.
On May 18th, George Osborne emailed a Leeds parent in a similar situation to us, saying it is incumbent on councils to ensure school places are allocated in a way that meets the needs of local parents. Given that Loddon Primary School has existing infrastructure and empty classrooms, what measures are the council taking to help the head teacher of Loddon secure the staff she needs for an extra September intake? And have the council taken advice or learned lessons from George Osborne and Leeds City Council, who have managed to secure 90 additional places for children, appoint the necessary teachers, secure the cooperation of heads and governors of 3 schools, all within 5 weeks of a school place shortage becoming public knowledge?
Thank you for the question, for the supplementary question. We have asked the school, and their response thus far has been that they are unable to assist this year. I understand why you're asking, because of the other services that are already provided in their spaces. But I think that my first answer gave you the answers about what those spaces have been used for at the moment. If we were to put in a bulge class, then we'd need to consider where the bulge class would go, and those spaces at the moment are not available for that bulge class. So I think that if we are to go back to the school, we need to be asking them where else we could put the bulge class, and it would also need to be a consideration of what other teachers would be used for that bulge class. In terms of our duty to find sufficient places, this year we have done that in the borough, and over the last number of years I've been in place, remember we have fulfilled our sufficiency duty to find places within the borough. And I'm incredibly sympathetic with the fact that they are not in the local area to where you would wish them to be. What I can say is that when it's a long time between now and September, and I know that some of those places will change, and some parents will be able to send their children to more local schools, and I hope that those numbers will change dramatically between now and then. But we will work with parents between the state and September to ensure that there are as many places as possibly locally, so that you're not having to go too far to local places.
Thank you. I know you will be disappointed with that answer, but if the head is saying they can't help, in the Council of Leeds, etc., you're probably absolutely right that everybody was willing to try and work, and I'm sure we will be continuing to try and find a solution to this particular issue. So thank you.
I would urge you to look to Leeds and see what they do to secure that cooperation.
We will do. We will do. Thank you. Is Jill Purchase here? Is Jill Purchase now? Okay, so she will get a written answer for her question. Is Claire Hickman here? Claire Hickman? No? So they will also get a written answer to their question. So I think that is the last public question. We then move on to member questions, and I believe, Prue, you've got a question.
Good evening, everybody, and good evening, Anthony. The capital outturn report on page 32 shows a proposed carry forward into 15-16 of £50,236,000. And pages 35 and 36 provide detail about £7,506,000 of that proposed carry forward that relates to 14-15 planned capital expenditure. Sorry, that's a bit long-winded, but nobody will understand it if I don't say that bit first. Would you specify in the same detail the remaining £42,730,000 proposed carry forward, so that the information shows which schemes and their related capital amount are being carried forward and when the spend was originally planned to occur?
Right. I'm very glad that you are a student of the capital outturn report too. Your question relates to schemes that were funded and have already been committed, and as such funding is carried forward automatically. So we can't start schemes, put schemes in the programme until we have funding. The 42.7 million committed carry forward, 30 million relates to schemes that were profiled to begin in the following financial year, 15-16, and the remaining 12.2 million relates to schemes begun in 14-15 where there's been some slippage. The detail you require, I've not been able to dig up in time, but perhaps you and I can meet outside this meeting and try and give you the information which you require.
Do you have a supplement?
I do, and I thank Anthony for his first answer, because I was terrified I was going to have to write down all the figures for 50,000 different things, but that would be a very good outcome to that. I do think we do all understand there's a difference between the carry forwards for capital schemes which were profiled to last several years and the carry forwards for capital schemes which have slipped. Okay. For the sake of transparency and for the sake of strategic oversight, I think the capital outturn report should give details of both. Could you undertake that in future capital outturn reports there will be some clear and detailed information on the carry forwards for both the multi-year projects and projects where spend has slipped?
I will discuss your suggestion with my relevant officer and see what can be done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prue. So we move now on to matters for consideration. The first one is item 6, revenue monitoring 2014-15 outturn, 2014-15, pages 15 to 24. Back to you.
Thank you very much. This is my annual opportunity to heap praises on our financial team and also on the officers generally for bringing the budget in on the right side of the line. A number of us, all of us, have sat here. I think a year ago there was some things that came out of the woodwork which showed quite a high potential overspend, and I think we are sitting here now forecasting a £30,000 underspend. I think for many people they don't really understand the amount of work that goes into actually delivering that turnaround, so credit must be delivered. So revenue's underspent by 30, housing revenue by nearly £1 million. Though, of course, the housing revenue effectively recycles into spending on our housing stock. And the schools block was a slight overspend of 22, and I'm aware that there have been pressures in that area. Obviously, this is a continuation of our sound financial management. It will get tougher as times go forward over the next 5 years, but no doubt we'll all rise to the challenge, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions, comments from anyone? Angus?
I'll talk through that. Just quite a small item, £10,000 been carried forward for Jubilee tree maintenance. And I would just wish to point out the benefit of having had this money for maintenance. We've planted 60 trees, oak trees around the borough, on behalf of the Diamond Jubilee of the Queen. 59 of those are still there, the 60th has been replaced. And I think that amply shows the benefit of having this maintenance programme and what a good programme it was.
Yes, thank you for that. I think the aspect of the relatively low level of carry forwards this year was also a testimony to the work that's been done by officers as well, because that figure's been anything up to £1 million in previous years. So, well done.
So if there is no other questions, let's go through all those in favour of voting. Thank you. Anthony, you're up again. Capital Outturn Report 2014-15, pages 25 to 36.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that the crew has spent many evenings going through this report, and obviously one error that has come to light is at the top of page 33. The overall underspend is not 46,000, it's actually 83,000 pounds. So again, that is a real saving on the schemes that have been undertaken. Often there are difficulties profiling a capital scheme spend because there can be issues relating to design, there can be issues relating to obtaining people to actually undertake the scheme, and that can delay the time when the scheme is started. And that's why we have introduced last year a split between profiling of the expenditure between the various years in which the expenditure is likely to take place. Hence, we have a little bit of slippage this year, some of which was effectively a planned slippage, some of which is a more genuine slippage related to schemes that have been started, which we expected to be completed but haven't been. And those are detailed on pages 35 and 36. The other aspect I would say is that the level of the capital programme has increased substantially in recent years with the work on the SDLs, the building of new secondary schools, the improvements in a number of our secondary schools, and obviously the work required to monitor and manage that size of programme is substantial, and much credit needs to go to the people who look after them and make sure that the budgets are on the way. And I'll take any questions.
Any questions or comments? Move straight to the vote. The vote is on to note the capital outturn and approve the carry forwards. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Exciting one now. Gypsy and Traveller Local Plan Preferred Options Consultation, pages 37 to 42. John?
Thank you, Chairman. This is part two, if you like, of the consultation. All councils are required by government to identify accommodation needs of gypsies and travellers and prepare a plan to show how these needs will be met. This would enable us to resist gypsy and traveller sites and unplanned in appropriate locations, at the same time ensuring that there's sufficient provision is available to meet any identified need. No site allocation is taking place at this time and will not until all comments from residents and other interested parties are received, which will inform these decisions. The preferred option of the Gypsy and Traveller Local Plan sets out how any identified future accommodation needs for gypsies and travellers could be met up to 2029. If approved by the Executive, the Borough Council will seek the community's view on the various approaches chosen to address this issue, including size and location of new gypsy traveller site. If approved tonight, the consultation will begin on the 4th of June and will run till 4 o'clock on July the 30th. Following the consultation, the Council would prepare the proposed submission plan based on the outcome of the consultation, which will be subject to further consultation later this year. This document will include detailed planning policy and guidance to inform and manage future gypsy and traveller development. We need to find out what the residents think about these measures to enable us to plan this plan to move on to the next stage. But please remember, without doing this work, the Council will be vulnerable to appeal decisions regarding gypsy and Roma traveller applications. And so I ask for permission to take this forward to the next stage of consultation, Chair.
Thank you, John. Is any questions or comments? Can I move straight to the vote then? The recommendations on page 37 to approve the local plan preferred options for consultation and to authorise the Director of Environment in consultation with the executive member to agree minor modifications. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next one is changes to charging for attendance at adult social care day centres from June 2015, pages 43 to 46. Judith?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a mopping up, somewhat of a mopping up exercise. Members will remember that on the 29th of January we made the decision to take away some of the subsidies. We carried out those, but we missed off the daycare centre charges. So this is really just a sort of catch up. So just to make sure that we've got everything correct. So we have already debated this, so I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have. But it is really just to put this in line with all the other charges that we have.
Any questions or comments? Pauline?
Very minor question, I presume it's not going to be retrospective.
It won't be, no.
Any other questions? Can we move to the vote? Recommendations are on page 43. That all chargeable services will be charged, blah, 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 blah. New charges are phased in for those currently receiving services. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, item 10, council-owned companies business. One of mine. This is a new style of presentation, a new template on the council-owned businesses to address some transparency issues that have been raised by a number of people, and it effectively is a summary of what's been happening, changes over the last month. The intention is that this will appear every month, detailing significant changes in any of our companies and the financial position. I think it's fairly straightforward, so any questions or comments? Otherwise, can I move to...
Just looks very easy to read.
Just a comment.
Charlotte?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say I welcome this very much. It's very transparent, easy to read, and very useful. Thank you.
Good.
Okay. I think this is just a first step in the journey, that we have every intention to make our council-owned companies business more and more transparent without impacting the integrity and the commerciality and confidentiality of the individual companies. So on that, can we go through, you see the recommendations there on page 47. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. John, course right side, pages 57 to 66.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be speaking about Gorside South, but there's been new legislation and policy with regards to right and buy, and that will be informed. That will inform the consultation. What I'm asking for here, basically, we have Royal Gorside. There's 177 houses. Most of those houses are non-traditional build, and they're beginning to reach the point where it's pretty much impossible to keep them within our, or the government's, decent home standards. So what we want to do is we want to do a consultation and also remove the right to buy while we do it, which is basically serving a demolition order. That sounds a lot more serious than it is. I mean, this is a big development. It will take years and years to do this. We're not just going to rush in there and demolish everything. But we have to put that in while we do the consultation. So what I'm asking for is the opportunity to for our tenant services team to go away and start to do some work on this. As I say, it will be informed by the new right to buy policy.
Anthony?
I just really wanted to say how strongly I support this proposal. I think it's been something that we've been working on behind the scenes for a year or two now, and it has been, I would describe actually that a lot of the houses probably are beyond their useful habitable life, and in some ways are a little bit of a shame on the council for still having them around. But we have a lot of our council stock that we actually still own is actually very old, and therefore this sort of work, this sort of rebuild, refurb, improving the densities, building to modern standards is something that I think we're going to do more of in other parts of the borough. We've obviously got Eustace Crescent and this one, and there are others certainly in my ward as well. So I'm really keen on this and look forward to seeing it delivered.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that whilst this disruption is going on, I've had it confirmed from the Community Development team that they will be fully supporting all residents in this. And I think that's very important that continues throughout the whole process.
Can I just make one other point? This will, if we go forward with this, it will take a number of years for us to do it. What we do not intend to do is we do not intend to scrimp or scrape on the repairs for the people who already live there. Their living conditions will continue as they are, and we will make sure that any repairs that are needed we will do. So it's not a case of just letting it go to wreck. No, it's really important people understand.
Any other questions, comments? The recommendations, page 57, serving the demolition notice, formation of a project group. All those in favour, please show.
Can we say anything?
Sorry. Needed to submit a question.
Can't submit a question if you're not informed of the meeting properly, and if you're not, we actually submitted that question last night.
We did that, I'm sure you for the second.
Can I ask that after, because we're getting through the agenda quite quickly, if you've got time.
Out the other day.
Okay, if you've got time afterwards, if I can ask you, John.
Can you
is that-
postpone it a little bit then, so it can be a bit thorough?
No, we can't, unfortunately, because it's been publicised. But what I'm going to
Should we
suggest,
keep it there
if you could stay afterwards,
Yeah, we will.
John, and then talk directly to John.
Think about if it's your house,
Alright.
and it's your kids, and it's your community.
So we'll talk, and there will be there are other opportunities. But initially, if you can talk to John, and he'll take your. Right. So we've taken the vote on that. Thank you. Now the next three items all have part 2 types, content. Part 2 is confidentiality, where the general public is not allowed, it's usually commercial information. Now, what often we try to do is just to do the non-part 2 base, so that if people are interested, they can stay. Usually we don't actually have to get into the part 2. So if I'm looking at all my exec view, all up, okay for that?
Yeah.
Right. So take Lane. Item 12.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, there is some pink papers that go with this, which I can answer for members after the meeting, after the public withdrawn. We have a situation here. We've got 6 homes that were built just after the war. They were temporary homes. And of course they've reached that point in their life where we can no longer continue to maintain them. So what we're asking here for is to approve the demolition of the houses 21 to 26 Tank Lane, approve the decanting of the tenants for temporary or permanent homes, and approve the funding that's required from the HRA, and delegate the authority to the Director of Health and Wellbeing to submit a detailed planning application for the redevelopment.
Appears quite straightforward. Got any questions or comments? Can we go straight? Pauline?
Just one question. About the decanting of the current tenants, are they going to be decanted to somewhere reasonably close by or sensible?
The issue, we as you probably know, we did this with Eustace Crescent, which is now Phoenix Avenue, here over a period of time. We will only do this in consultation with residents. The choice will be either to go to permanent accommodation, which will be that we will supply, or temporary accommodation, which will be the same type of accommodation, but I call it temporary because it will allow those people to move back. They will be given no choice. We'll be building, I think it's about 10 houses there. The planning's yet to be agreed, and the people who live there currently will be given priority to move back to those new properties.
If there's no other questions, we'll move to the vote. The recommendations are on page 67. Thank you. They're in front of you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 13, the secondary school in South Rockingham. Can you please just, if you want to...
Just give us a little bit more warning.
We will address that. We will. Excuse me. We will address that afterwards.
That's terrible.
We will address that afterwards. But if you can, the quicker we can get on with this, the quicker we can talk to you. Thank you. New secondary school. Who's leading this? Charlotte?
Excellent. Apologies for my We're bringing this paper back to the executive to ask for some additional funding for the secondary school in the south of the borough. When we first took the paper to the executive back in July 2014, the paper was based on a very basic 3-storey Department for Education design, and it made certain assumptions about a number of different things, including foundations, the very basic external finishing of the building, and things such as flat roofs, etc., and also the fittings and fixtures within the building. Since then, a lot of work has gone on subsequently to look at what would meet the community needs as well as the student needs for that building. The design has been uplifted to take into account a much larger sports facility, also a much more enhanced design. So we've got, subsequently, we've been looking at breakout spaces along the corridors, so that's an equivalent of 6 additional classrooms, which will make much more flexible teaching spaces. There's 2 large barn constructions in the centre areas between the E shapes of the building, which is much more improved environment for school use and also for community use when the building is not in school use. One of the large barns can accommodate between 500 and 600 people. The other areas are also enhanced facilities for a much larger school for 1,500 at maximum capacity. So that means that the kitchen areas and science areas, etc., need to be larger to accommodate a larger school. There are things like glazed stairwells at the end of the corridors, so it's better for safeguarding and much better lighting. And wider corridors and walkways, so better flow and better circulation. Lastly, much better sports facilities outside. So we're putting in a full-size all-weather pitch with floodlighting, so it will mean that we can have competitive league matches there. So again, it would be great for the school, but not only that, but also for the community use as well. So dual purpose.
Thank you. Pauline?
Just like some reassurance that other schools are not going to have capital funding that's required for renovation and improvement removed because of this increased expenditure.
Within the capital funding for going forward, there is £2 million within the capital budget for next year for capital funds within other schools as well. So, but other schools, academies, have other routes that they can apply for funding as well. And recently, the Forest have applied for funding for their 6th form block, and they were successful in doing that. Free schools also have alternative means of getting more funding. They go directly to the Educational Funding Agency, so that's how they would go about doing that. We also have put aside some extra funding for contingency within this budget as well. That's 3.36 million. That's coming from basic needs money, but we don't expect to be using that. But if that's not used, then we'll be using it for other educational purposes.
Philip?
Thank you, Chairman. I must admit, when I first saw this request, that I was concerned about Embrook School because, of course, we've had a £2 million English block donation, and we were looking forward to a maths block. And now I'm pleased to say we've also got 2 million for the maths block, so you can go ahead for me, Charlotte.
Anthony?
Yeah, I think with the issue with funding, we've had some extra money on basic need, and that's effectively part of where we're funding this from. So I'm comfortable that funding can be achieved within our capital programme. We've made a significant investment over a number of schools in the last 10 years, and I see no reason why we can't continue to make the relevant investments we need to. So I'm confident in the funding side of this, though I will be watching the contingency fund.
Absolutely, I expect so.
Change there.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 points. One, from my sort of portfolio, I'm delighted to see that we are putting greater attention on sports facilities. And of course, the positioning of the school further enhances that with some of the facilities that hopefully we'll be able to take over from the garrison and maybe others. I wonder if I could just go slightly off message and ask my colleague, in my particular ward there's been stories running, I don't know where they started from, but this just won't go away, that somehow the catchment area for this school will stretch right across to Woking Without, and as it's a public meeting, if there is an assurance that I can be given that it's not happening, this will be enormously helpful to my residents.
Thank you very much for your question. In terms of the designated area, all of the providers that have applied for this school have said that they don't want to change the designated area that currently exists for the schools. So it would be the same designated area that applies to Forest, Holt, St Crispin's and Embrook as well. Oakbank sits currently within that area, but they have a slightly different arrangement because they're a free school as well. So in terms of how Woking Without parents will be affected, there will be no change. At some point in the future, the school may wish to make their own designated area and change it slightly, but at this point there's no plans to do that. And when you do that, you have to go out and consult, and that takes a long time to do that. So if the Secretary of State would need to make approval for a designated area change, if there were to be changes, and you need to start a consultation right now in September, well, for September 2015, and the changes wouldn't come in place to September 2017. But as I said, the providers at this point that have applied for it have plans to do that.
Oh, could I just come back very briefly on that, Chairman? Quite understand that, and thank you for that assurance. There's nothing different from what you've said by the fact that most of my ward catchment is Edgebarrow School in Bracknell. If that doesn't change what you've said, thank you.
John?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to welcome the school. I mean, I live in Alderfield, but I would just like to say on behalf of my ward, Barkham, it's nice you're building it in Barkham and not Alderfield. If you're building it in Alderfield, I'd like to stop that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one question or clarification, Charlotte. It's my understanding that the initial budget was put together really before the parent group was up and running, and a lot of the changes that have resulted in additional funding required have been driven by the parents group, the future parents defining what they wanted. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, the initial paper that came to the executive was July 2014, and as I said, it was based on the Department for Education very, very basic model. It didn't even include double glazing, for example. Then the parent reference group came together, and they went out and spoke to lots of different people in the community and other parents as well. And they informed many of the decisions that you've seen and many of the things that I talked to you about. And they were a key part of deciding what was best for a school in that area. And I'd like to put on record my thanks to them for being so committed in helping us choose many of the things that are going to make this school such a fantastic part of the community.
Thank you. I think it's an amazing community-based model to involve the community to this extent. It's the first time I've heard it done, certainly in our borough. So really, really good. So we move on to the recommendations on page 73. There's 6 of them there. Can I see all those in favour, all 6? Thank you, that's unanimous. Moving on to the last piece, working in theatre new lease. I think that's you, Bert.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it is. First of all, I'd like to just make a slight correction to the first paragraph here, where it says a longer lease will permit Woking Theatre Limited to raise funds against the property for improvements to a building which is becoming dilapidated. This is not a correct statement. It is a building that has been so successful that it now needs to expand, and as a result of that, that's why we're supporting them in extending this lease. And I think it's very important to make that point, because it is a very successful amateur theatre organisation. We have negotiated for some while with them to change their outstanding current 13-year lease to a new 50-year lease. This allows them to get financial funding to have rehearsal rooms, studio rooms, etc., to extend the opportunity in the community. In return for this, they're going to ensure that we're seen as sponsors within all their programmes, and that's acknowledging the fact that the Borough Council are supporting them ongoing. There will be regular RPI reviews, and I think it is a straightforward solution to assist the community and this excellent theatre operation, and I'd like your support, please. Thank you.
Any questions? One?
Another question, just a comment. I'd like particularly to thank Philip for putting the RPI reviews in, because I think that'll save us having a discussion every couple of years about what the rent should be, etc. Everybody has consistency and they can plan for the increases. Also sounds like a really good facility.
As a former thespian myself, I can actually vouch for the quality of working in theatre. It's really one of the top amateur dramatic organisations within not just the borough, but actually probably Berkshire. They're really are good. And I can recommend anyone to go and see good plays, etc.
On commission? They were on commission?
No. So moving on to the recommendation, and I'm sure we can get that, because I didn't want this to go out into the public domain. I know it is now, but can we correct it?
We can't read it, but I'll put it in the minutes.
Okay, thank you. So all those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous, and that's the last item on the agenda, so the meeting is closed. If you'd like us to hang around,